Nearly all programming languages give you a way of creating reusable code blocks. The names for these code blocks differ from one language to another. In strongly object-oriented languages like Java or C#, they're called methods. In Visual Basic, there's a generic name for them, procedures, but there are two different kinds of procedures, subroutines and functions. In our current application, I'm already using subroutines. I'm working in a version of my project called procedures. And in this application, there's a subroutine called run code. This code is executed when the user clicks the Go button. There are two other subroutines, and their names are output and clear output. A Visual Basic subroutine is a reusable code block that doesn't return a value. In contrast, a procedure that does return a value is called a function. To demonstrate this, I'm going to move some of the existing code from my run code subroutine and place it into a function that returns a value. I'll take this code that's doing the calculation itself. So let's start by creating a new function at the bottom of the class. I'll move the cursor after the existing subroutines and type the word function. Then I'll give the function a name of calculate. Subroutines and functions can accept as many arguments or parameters as you need. The output subroutine right now receives a single string parameter, and clear output receives 2 parameters. My calculate function will receive 3 arguments or parameters. Just as in run code, the first 2 will be the double values, dbl1 and dbl2. You data type your arguments in the same way you do variables, with the as keyword. The third argument will be the operation, add, subtract, multiply, or divide. You can name the arguments anything you like, and to demonstrate the difference, I'll name this argument OP for operation, and I'll set its data type to string. Functions return values, and you should declare the data type of the returned value. You do this with the keyword as. Before I type in the return value, I'll put in a continuation character and go to the next line. Then, I'll say that the function is returning a string with as string. When I press enter, Visual Studio adds end function. Now, all of the code that's a part of the function will go between function and end function. I'm going to move some existing code from run code to calculate. I'll take this select case statement, copy it to the clipboard, and then paste it into my new function. I immediately see that there are some errors to deal with. First, I'll deal with the constants, add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Visual Studio is telling me that these constants can't be found, that they're not declared. I did declare them though, but I declared them in the other procedure, in the run code subroutine. To make the constants visible to all of the procedures in this class, I need to move the constant declarations. So I'll go back up to the top of my code and locate my constants. And I'll select and cut them from their current location, and I'll place them outside of any of the procedures. Notice that I'm pasting this code after the class declaration, but before the subroutine. Now I'll scroll back down to my new function, and I'll see that the errors for the constants have been cleared. Next, I'll deal with this error. It's telling me that there's no such value as operation, and that's because I named this argument OP. So I'll correct that by removing the end of the name. And when I move the cursor off that line, Visual Studio clears the error. Next, I'm being told that there is no variable called result, and that's because I originally declared that variable in the run code subroutine. I'm going to declare it again here, so that I have a version of the variable that's local to the function. Remember that when you declare a variable inside a function, it isn't visible to the rest of the application. So I'll place the cursor before the select case statement and declare dim result as double. And that clears those errors. Next, I'm going to remove some of the select case statement. I won't need the case else statement. I'm going to redesign or refactor this code so that I only call the calculate function when I know I have valid double values and I have a valid operation. So I'm going to remove the case else statement. And then finally, I'll return the result. I'll place the cursor after the end select and type in return result. And there's my finished function. You can design your own functions in your Visual Basic code to do whatever you need. But again, the difference between a function and a subroutine is that a function always returns a value. Now I'll go back up to my calling code. I no longer need most of the select case statement. I'm going to get rid of the select case operation and the first 4 cases, and I'll also get rid of the return statement and the end select. And I'm left with 2 outputs. First, I'll deal with the output that says you didn't select an operation. I want to output that message if the user didn't choose an operation. So I'm going to move it up in my code. I'll cut and paste it, and I'll place it after the end if. And then I'll wrap it in its own conditional clause. Right before this step, I checked my buttons to see what was checked and what wasn't checked. And remember that I had originally set operation to a value of none. So I'll check its value here with if operation equals none. And if that's the case, I'll output that error message and return. And so I won't go on to do the calculation. If I get to the declaration of the result variable here, then I know that I have valid numeric values and I have a valid operation. So now all I have to do is say that I want to set the value of result using my new calculate function with equals calculate, and then I'll pass in dbl1, dbl2, and operation. And now I've refactored the code so that the complex work, that is the calculation itself, is in its own function, and it can be called from anywhere in my application. I'll run the application, and I'll test it. I'll type in numeric values, and first I'll click Go, and I see that I didn't get a valid operation. Then I'll click Add, and I get the result is 15, subtract, multiply, and divide. Your application can include as many functions as are necessary. Use functions and subroutines to package up code that you'll be calling multiple times, or to simply wrap or encapsulate complex code so that your code blocks don't get too long and your application is more maintainable.